Some women spend their entire lives searching for a man like Don Rafael Santini. Ariana Greco spent exactly one evening trying to escape him, and failed beautifully. He was the kind of dangerous that wore a tailored suit and spoke in low, measured sentences that made entire rooms go still. She was the kind of brave that trembled while standing its ground. Neither of them chose that night. But fate, it seems, has never once asked permission. If this story moves you, please like, share, and subscribe. Now let us begin. The evening smelled of jasmine and something older, money perhaps, and the kind of power that doesn't need to announce itself. Ariana Greco stood at the edge of her father's parlor in a dress the color of midnight, holding a glass of wine she had not touched in 40 minutes. Around her, the men of Naples, the real men, the ones who owned silence and used it like currency, moved through the room with the ease of wolves in familiar territory. She was 22 years old and she did not belong here, and every cell in her body knew it. She also knew, without being told, that something was ending tonight. The way her father kept glancing at her. The way her uncle wouldn't meet her eyes. The peculiar stillness of the house, as though it had already accepted what she had not. He entered at 9:20. The room changed when Rafael Santini walked into it, not loudly, not dramatically, but the way a barometric pressure shifts before a storm. Men who had been laughing straightened. Women who had been speaking lowered their voices. He was tall, broad-shouldered, olive-skinned, with dark hair swept back and a jaw like something carved rather than born. He wore charcoal and white with no tie, his collar open by exactly one button, as though formality were something he permitted for others. He was 34 years old, and he looked like a man who had already won every war he had ever entered. Ariana noticed him the way you notice lightning, involuntarily, and with a catch of breath she immediately resented. Don Santini. Her father appeared at his elbow like a man trying to look casual while drowning. "Welcome. Please come in." Raphael's eyes moved through the room once, slowly. Then they found her. He did not look away. She did. Her father told her at midnight, in the kitchen, while the guests still murmured beyond the closed door. He spoke quietly and quickly, the way people speak when they are ashamed of the words coming out of their mouths. The Greco family owed Don Santini a debt that had been accumulating for 6 years. Not money, territory, favor, protection, allegiance. The kind of debt that could not be repaid in installments. The kind that required a gesture of permanence. "He asked for you specifically," her father said, not looking at her. "He's seen you before. At the Morano dinner in February. He remembered." "He remembered," she repeated, her voice perfectly flat. "And I'm supposed to marry him. In 6 weeks." The silence that followed was the loudest thing Ariana had ever heard. She placed her wine glass on the counter with a care that took everything she had. She walked to her bedroom. She sat on the edge of her bed in the dark, and she did not cry, because crying required believing that someone in this house would come through the door and tell her it was a mistake. No one came. The meetings that followed were formal, structured, suffocating. Her father present. A lawyer. Sometimes Raphael's right hand. A quiet man named Marco who wrote things in a leather notebook and said almost nothing. Raphael himself was different from what she expected. She had braced herself for cruelty. For entitlement. For the crude exercise of power that men in his position often wore as aftershave. What she found instead was something far more disorienting: restraint. He sat across from her at a glass table in a conference room above the city and watched her with those dark, unreadable eyes, and he was patient. "You don't want this," he said, during their second meeting. The others had stepped out briefly. It was the first time he'd spoken to her directly, and the directness hit her like cold air. "Does it matter?" she said. "Yes," he said simply. "It does." She searched his face for performance, for the manipulation behind the softness. She found nothing she could name, and that frightened her more than anything recognizable would have. The wedding was small by his world's standards. 40 guests, a private estate above the hills, white roses and candlelight, a priest who spoke in Latin and did not ask if anyone objected because everyone in the room already knew the answer. Ariana walked down the aisle in a dress that cost more than her childhood bedroom, her hand resting on her father's arm like a woman holding something she was afraid to grip too tightly. She kept her chin level, her eyes forward. She had decided, somewhere in the weeks prior, that she would not give anyone the satisfaction of watching her crumble. When she reached the altar, Raphael turned to look at her. And something happened to his face. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but it was real. A softening around the eyes. A stillness that was different from his usual stillness. as if he were trying to memorize something before it disappeared. She looked away. The priest began to speak. Later that night, the phrase would become the hinge of everything she thought she understood. His estate was an hour north of the city, a restored 16th-century villa set back from a private road, with iron gates that closed behind the car like punctuation. The staff had been dismissed. Champagne sat untouched on a silver tray in the entrance hall. The house was all high ceilings and candlelight and the particular silence of money, so old it had stopped trying to impress anyone. Ariana stood in the center of the master bedroom and waited for the thing she had been dreading for 6 weeks. The door opened. Raphael entered, shrugged off his jacket, and laid it across a chair. He rolled his sleeves to the elbow. He moved to the opposite side of the room and poured 2 glasses of water from a carafe on the dresser. He brought one to her. She took it, watching him with the wariness of someone expecting a trap. "There is another room," he said. "2 doors down on the left. It has been prepared for you." She blinked. "What?" "This is your home now," he said. "You will have your own space until you choose otherwise. I will not ask for what hasn't been offered." He held her gaze for one measured moment. "I am not that kind of man, Ariana." The use of her name, the first time unhurried like he had been saving it, undid something small and structural inside her. She did not speak. She did not trust her voice. She simply nodded, turned, and walked to the door he had indicated. She lay in a bed that smelled of cedar and unfamiliar linen, staring at a ceiling she had never seen before, and she thought, "What is he?" She did not sleep for a long time. Neither, she would later learn, did he. She had expected a monster. Instead, she found a man who gave her space, and she was terrified to discover that this frightened her far more than cruelty ever could. Please like, share, and subscribe. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2. She learned the rhythm of his house the way you learn a piece of music. Slowly, by repetition, by the slow accumulation of small details. He left before 7 each morning. He returned by 8 each evening without fail. He ate dinner at a long oak table and always set a place for her, and he never once made her feel obligated to sit there, which was precisely why, by the 3rd week, she did. He cooked on Sundays. Not elaborately, pasta, usually with the focused attention of a man who understood that some things required patience and would not be rushed. "You look surprised," he said once, catching her watching from the kitchen doorway. "My father never cooked a single meal," she said. "Your father," Raphael said, his tone revealing nothing, "is a man who lets others carry what he should carry himself." He said nothing else. He handed her a spoon and asked her to taste the sauce. It was, absurdly, one of the most intimate moments of her adult life. The devotions came quietly, the way all the important things in his world seemed to come. A book she mentioned once, offhandedly, appeared on her nightstand 2 days later. No note, no flourish. When she mentioned the cold in the West Wing in passing, it was resolved by morning. When she could not sleep and went to the library at 2 a.m., she found a lamp already burning, as though someone had anticipated her restlessness. She stopped pretending not to notice. She did not yet let herself name what she felt. But something was shifting, low and tectonic, the kind of movement you only recognize in retrospect. His name was Luca Ferrante, and he arrived at a function in the city 6 weeks after the wedding. A charity gala at a gallery near the waterfront that Ariana attended on Raphael's arm, wearing emerald silk, her hair swept up, looking every inch the Don's wife even though she still wasn't certain what that meant. Luca was young, handsome in an uncomplicated way, and he found her near the champagne table when Raphael was pulled aside by business. "You're too beautiful to look so bored," he said, leaning in with the confidence of a man who had never been told no. She gave him a polite, cool smile. "I'm not bored. I'm observing." "Observing what?" "How men behave when they think no one important is watching." He laughed. He leaned closer. He touched her arm. Across the room, Raphael Santini stopped mid-sentence. The man he had been speaking with noticed the change immediately and fell quiet. Raphael did not raise his voice. He did not move quickly. He set down his glass with a deliberate, terrifying calm and crossed the room like something that had already decided the outcome and was simply completing the formality of arrival. "Luca," he said. His voice was quiet. Pleasant, even. The kind of pleasant that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Luca stepped back. He murmured something, an apology dressed as a greeting, and was gone before Ariana had fully processed what had happened. Raphael did not look at her with accusation. He looked at her with something she couldn't immediately classify, something that ran far deeper than jealousy, like a man who had just been reminded of exactly how much he had to lose. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I didn't need rescuing," she said. "I know," he said. "I wasn't rescuing you." She held his gaze. "Then what were you doing?" A long pause. A muscle in his jaw. Then, quietly, "Reminding myself to be patient." He offered her his arm. She took it, and they walked back into the gallery, and neither of them spoke about it again that night. But the temperature between them had shifted by several irreversible degrees. The argument came on a Tuesday, sharp and sudden, the way real ones always do, not from nowhere, but from the accumulated pressure of everything unsaid. She had found a folder on his desk. Not snooping, she had been looking for a pen, and the folder had fallen, and the photographs inside had spilled across the floor. They were photographs of her. Not invasive. Not sinister. Her at the market 2 months ago. Her at her sister's apartment. Her walking along the harbor wall with her hair in the wind, laughing at something. Taken before the engagement. Before the meetings. Before the wedding. "How long?" she asked when he came home. She was standing in the center of the study, the photographs on the desk between them. "How long had you been watching me before any of this?" He looked at the photographs. He looked at her. He did not flinch. 8 months, he said. 8 months. She breathed through it. "You had me watched. Followed. And then you arranged." "I did not arrange the debt," he said. "Your father's debts were your father's choices. When the arrangement became possible, yes, I chose it. I chose it because I could not find a way to reach you that didn't terrify you more than this did." "You should have tried," she said, her voice breaking on the last word. "Ariana." He came toward her, and she stepped back. He stopped. His hands, she noticed, were not entirely steady. I know that. There is no version of what I did that is right. I am telling you the truth of why, not to be forgiven, just to be known." She left that night, drove to her sister's apartment, and sat on the sofa in her coat, and did not explain anything. Her sister made tea and held her hand and asked no questions, which was the only kindness that could have reached her. She came back 3 days later, not because she had decided to forgive him, but because something had happened that made everything else secondary. 2 men had been outside her sister's building. Not hovering, not threatening, but present in the careful, specific way that told her they were not there by accident. She called Marco before she had even consciously decided to, and he said very quietly, "There are people who want to reach Don Santini through you. Please come home." Home. The word landed wrong and right at the same time. The threat was real. A rival faction, the Caruso network, old enemies of the Santini family, men who had been waiting years for Raphael's first vulnerability, had identified her. She was new. She was unguarded. She was the one soft place in an otherwise impenetrable man. Raphael told her himself, at the kitchen table, with 2 cups of coffee and no one else in the room. He told her everything, who they were, what they wanted, how close they had come. His voice did not waver. But his eyes, for the first time she had ever witnessed, were afraid. "I am going to end this," he said. "And when it is ended, if you want to leave, truly leave, not just disappear to your sisters, I will let you go. I will ensure you are protected and provided for and completely free. I will not hold you to a contract that was never fair." "Raphael, let me finish." He exhaled slowly. "I chose you before you chose me. I built something here, this house, this life, and I told myself it would be enough to simply have you in it, that you didn't need to love me back. That proximity would be sufficient." His jaw tightened. It isn't sufficient, and I am tired of pretending otherwise. I love you. I have loved you since I watched you at your father's table in February, arguing with a man twice your age about a book he clearly hadn't read, refusing to soften a single syllable of your opinion. Something almost like a smile crossed his face. I have never admired anything the way I admired you in that moment. The kitchen was very quiet. Ariana looked at the man across from her. The man who had cooked her pasta on Sundays and lit the library lamp in the small hours and crossed a crowded room because another man had touched her arm. And she understood, with the terrible clarity of someone arriving somewhere they have been walking toward for months, that she was already in love with him. Had been, probably, since the cedar-scented night he had told her the room down the hall was hers. "I'm not leaving," she said. He went very still. "I'm not leaving," she said again, steadier. "Not because I'm afraid. Because I don't want to." She stood. She crossed the space between them. She put her hand against his jaw, the first time she had ever reached for him, and she felt him close his eyes like a man receiving something he had stopped allowing himself to want. "But you have to be honest with me. About everything. Always. Always," he said, and the word held the full weight of a vow. He dismantled the Caruso threat in 17 days. She did not ask for the details. She understood that there was a part of his world that would always exist just beyond the edge of her knowing, and she had made a decision, conscious, clear-eyed, to love the man, not the myth. What she knew, he came home every night. He kept his word. He looked at her across dinner tables and crowded rooms with the focused, private attention of a man who has found the one fixed point in his universe. What she knew, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The night the last threat was resolved, he came home at midnight, quieter than usual, and she was awake. She had left the lamp on. He stood in the doorway of their room, hers now, both of theirs now, for 3 weeks, and looked at her, and something in his posture was different. The tension he carried as a constant, structural thing was gone. He looked, for the first time, like a man who was simply tired and safe and home. She held out her hand. He came to her. And what followed belongs only to them. Quiet and real and entirely theirs, the kind of intimacy that cannot be described without diminishing it, the kind that leaves a mark not on the body, but somewhere much deeper and more permanent. For months later, in the same kitchen where he had first told her he loved her, Ariana sat across from Raphael with a small paper rectangle between her hands and watched his face. He was very still. And then, slowly, his expression opened. Not the careful, guarded opening she had learned to read over months. Something else entirely. Something unguarded and enormous and young. As though the man who governed rooms and inherited empires had been briefly set aside, and what remained was simply a person who had been given the most astonishing gift of his life. "Are you?" he started. "Yes," she said. He reached across the table. He took both her hands in his, and he bowed his head over them, and for a long moment he simply breathed. When he looked up, his eyes were bright. "I would have given up everything," he said quietly. "The name, the network, the power, all of it, freely, for one day of what we have now." "You don't have to give up anything," she said. "We're building something new." He brought her hand to his mouth and pressed his lips to her palm, slow and deliberate, the way he did everything, with the full, certain weight of a man who has finally arrived where he was always meant to be. Outside the villa windows, the hills of Naples rolled green and gold in the morning light, indifferent and ancient and beautiful. Inside, 2 people sat at a kitchen table and chose each other, not because of debt or arrangement or the cold machinery of powerful families, but because love, when it is real, does not require permission. It simply arrives and stays. She came to him as a debt to be paid. She stayed as the woman who owned him completely. And he, the most powerful man in Naples, had never been so willingly undone. Thank you for reading. Like, shared, subscribe.